Okay, we're live. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. This is Alix, and Alix can probably introduce herself better than I can, but Alix is a porn researcher. She runs Gender Mapper, and what else?
So I'm also one of the co-founders of Partners for Ethical Care, which is a nonprofit, a 503c based out of Chicago, that is run by women who want to raise the alarm about the gender industry. But the gender industry and the sex industry are very much interlinked, right? So if anybody is really talking about the gender industry, they should know they're talking about the gender industry, the porn industry, and the surrogacy industry. It's kind of all encapsulated into one massive problem for women.
Yeah, it's interesting because for at least a few years there, I was always kind of trying to figure out why all of the trans women or women people were also the sex work is work people. And I think that we've sort of started to begin to figure that out thanks to some deep diving from women like you and Genevieve Gluck. And it's quite interesting. I mean, they're really very well organized. I'll give them that.
Oh yeah. Well, listen. To be honest, the sex workers work people and the trans women or women people, it's the same people. These aren't like. Don't get me wrong. They are. It's the same group of. You get kind of harassing emails and harassing messages. It's the same group of people. The people who hate swerfs and the people who hate turfs. It's the same, right? Women
Right.
hating kind of crazy people. And I would say, a couple of useful cheerleaders like our dear friend who went on, Lex Friedman.
Yes, and we'll definitely talk about that interview and that situation because I mean, it's very disappointing to start. I'll say that it's disappointing,
Yeah.
but it's not. I suppose I shouldn't be too surprised by these things, but I would rather be surprised by these things by than be so cynical that I just expect it. I mean, men in the I really hate making generalizations, but in general, there's a lot of men, especially obviously in sort of the leftist progressive space, certainly the libertarian space, and of course in that heterodox space too, who really seem to have either a blind spot when it comes to the sex industry or they're remaining kind of intentionally ignorant in some cases. Some
Right.
in other cases definitely could be more nefarious than that.
Well, it's interesting because I'm obviously I'm not part of the red pill community or anything, but I certainly follow them online and see what they're up to. And a lot of these red pill guys are men who were previously very much addicted or are currently addicted to OnlyFans and pornography, and they have this massive amount of like self-loathing and hate really about it. They're very ashamed of the fact that they spend 3,000 or what even $100 a month on OnlyFans, right? They're not. And I think also this kind of we'll get into a little bit more kind of ties into we have to also ask ourselves why are so many OnlyFans models getting murdered by their fans?
Mm.
That's a huge question that obviously the police are not going to answer that. The police are going to find the perpetrator and have a trial. But as a culture, we should say, why are so many OnlyFans murders, models or OnlyFans creators being killed by the people that they're interacting with online on a regular basis? Is it actually a form of like domestic violence? Is it a form of spousal abuse? Because these people are in like a pseudo sexual relationship with each other, right? I mean, imagine you're in a relationship with someone and you send them like a sexy picture. That's like, something that's between two people. It's got like a sexy kind of edge to it, right? Something that a lot of people do. But imagine you're sending that picture out to 50,000 men and they're all having that kind of same experience. They're like, oh, Megan sent me a picture. No, Megan didn't send you a picture. Megan sent a picture to 50,000 of you, losers.
Yeah. It's a strange advancement in the porn world. And I think that it's interesting that you say that a lot of these guys who were kind of red pilled or maybe in that sort of like bro space where they're
Manosphere, they call it, yeah, the
engaged.
manosphere kind of space. That's where,
Yeah,
that's
or like
where,
they're
yeah.
engaged in like I guess I'm thinking about in part these like Logan Paul, Mike Majlak, Hassan guys, but also that sphere of empowering men and encouraging men to improve their lives, which I think is really great actually, and I like a lot of what is going on in that area, and I think it's really important because I think that men do need to empower themselves. I mean, women need to empower themselves also, of course, but we have seen this trend of sort of sad sack men who've been labeled incels or
Yeah.
the men going their own way sort of people,
Mhm.
and it's like, okay, no like victim mentality. Make yourself a better person. Like get out of
Right.
bed, get some exercise, improve yourself physically and
Mhm.
mentally and intellectually, and make yourself someone worth dating. Like if you're feeling lonely and you want relationships, then, make yourself worthy of a relationship. Make yourself proud of yourself. Like build confidence. And again, I think this applies to women too.
It sure
And so
does.
I can sort of see how some of these types would feel embarrassed or ashamed about spending money somewhere like OnlyFans because it's simpy.
It's incredibly simpy, and it's also a little cuck. I mean,
Yeah.
like that's kind of what I was so astounded by the whole Andrew Tate thing. It's like these are your. I mean, I know obviously he's pimping them, right? But let's imagine these really were his girlfriends, and this is a big cuck move, to let other people view your girlfriend naked and talk with her online and all the rest of it. I mean, it's kind of like that's why I was so sort of astounded by Mike Malak, who's
Oh, did I
the
say his last name wrong? Sorry, I don't know. I've just encountered these people very recently. Like I was not at all
right.
familiar with them until like a week ago.
Well, that's the thing because like he was introducing his girlfriend Lana Rhodes, who was the number one star on Pornhub, may still be the number one star on Pornhub. It was actually now an abolitionist, so go figure, right? But anyway, so he's kind of talking about like, have you seen my girl's, porn? Have you seen my girl OnlyFans? I'm like, why on earth? Like, she wants to bury that. She wants to get away from it. And you're constantly reminding people, like poking her like a circus animal. Like, have you seen all the crazy, dirty things my girlfriend's done online? Wow, what a sad sack move. Like, I couldn't really grasp my head around that. You know what I mean?
It was interesting watching. I guess maybe we should give a little bit of background about Lana Rhodes before we
Yeah,
get into that whole situation, because I think
yeah.
it's really worth talking about her and how these YouTubers and streamers, including her ex-boyfriend Mike, behaved and responded to and sort of framed her situation.
Oh, yeah.
Before, I just want to say to anyone who's tuned in, if you have questions or comments that you want us to address, that's great. Please use the super chat if you're able, because I'm not able to keep track very closely of the live chat, and I'm not looking at the comments underneath YouTube.
Megan, we actually just got a really interesting comment from Paul.
Okay.
Paul says, sure, I'm ashamed that I was addicted to porn, but it's awful and those women are troubled. I think that, like that's really amazing that Paul has decided to, say that because it's kind of the change has got to come from women, but it's also really got to come from men. And I think it's also quite interesting, this concept of, in order to break free from patriarchy, you need to open up an OnlyFans to empower yourself. This is a very powerful message, and it's very prevalent in Gen Z and in millennials online. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah, I mean, I what's really noticeable about a lot of these guys, and I think that the Gen Z women and, the millennial women too, actually, I think a lot of them anyway, have really glommed onto this message that unfortunately has been advanced in large ways by third wave feminism, by the actual
It's a
so-called
powerful message.
feminist movement.
It's
But
a
yeah,
powerful
it's like
message.
these guys act like, oh God, I'm so frustrated. It's like there's, they behave as though, this Ella woman, I'm now not sure if I'm saying her name properly, Aella, who I debated, although it wasn't really a proper debate, and I don't actually think either of us did very well, but nonetheless, on Benjamin Boyce's channel. I mean, I appreciated him hosting the conversation because I think it's good to have these conversations. So, but I will say that I think that I could have done a better job, and she probably feels the same way. But a lot of these guys in the heterodox space, Lex Friedman is one of those people, seem to be super impressed that this woman made a bunch of money on OnlyFans. Like, that's the major selling point. Seems to be, you made $100,000 on OnlyFans. That's amazing. And then it goes on to this, like, she comes off and presents herself as this sort of like intellectual, a little bit nerdy girl. So that really appeals to these kinds of men who like to think of themselves as intellectuals, as like highbrow, not lowbrow, like definitely not cucky, definitely not simps, like these guys who, they wouldn't stoop to watching, that regular porn, although I'm sure they have. But this prostitute is okay to engage with and look at and maybe even sleep with because,
it's a
she's
fantasy.
yeah, and
It's
she's this like middle class, like classy
exactly
intellectual who she loves sex work, so she's not
right.
being exploited. It's all good, all above board.
Same the thing with Lana. It was really fascinating because I've got so many videos of her 2 years ago saying, I just really love having sex. I just absolutely love it. So fuck it, man. I'm just going to do the work and get the money. And now she's like, okay, I was totally talking nonsense. This is a character that I have. I hate the porn. I'm so embarrassed. I'm so humiliated. All I want to do is strip it from the internet.
Yeah.
And that is, by the way, that's a really common thing that we hear a lot, right? Girls start out like, I just really love, I just love sex. So obviously, why wouldn't I capitalize on that? And then like, no. Even Riley Reid, who's another one who's very, very famous, she admits that her kind of persona of always being, the hot girl that's willing to do anything, like it is an act, you know what I mean? Like it's not a real thing. But men, I think like Stephen, they just love that fantasy of this, kind of like nymphomaniac that's out there like making money. And it's, to be honest, it's such a ridiculous fantasy because I think that it would be good of him to actually watch some of this porn before he talks to her, because I think that when you're talking to someone, they might be talking about this kind of, ephemeral, I do porn, in your mind, you've got like, erotica or like a boob picture, but in reality, like when you see the sick reality, it's a lot more difficult to actually defend it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's why people, when I talk to people who are like of my parents' generation or even like younger, like 40, 50, they're like, oh, it's just porn, like so what? And I'm like, have you seen it? Like that's the big question, is have you seen this content? And then tell me how you feel about it. Because most people, after they've seen the content, they're like, okay, I'm converted. Like, okay, the
Yeah.
will has been lifted from my eyes.
And then at the same time, like the men who are watching this porn, so do know what it is. I mean, they're very invested in that fantasy of like, maybe she's just a chick who loves sex. Some women just like having sex with lots of different men, as if that's what, prostitution and pornography is about. It's just like,
Right.
it's just the same as like being promiscuous or having casual sex, which it's not. And, there could be a critique to be made around that, but that's not what's happening here. What's happening
Yeah.
is that women are being pressured and coerced into doing all sorts of like degrading and
Well, that's the
humiliating
thing.
acts that aren't pleasurable and are often even painful. And, the only reason they're doing this obviously is because they're getting paid. Like the idea that it's like, oh, they just love sex. It's like, if they just love doing those things, then I think they would just go and do those things. Like, why are they doing this on camera for money. Like they're doing it because they're getting paid. Obviously, this is like the
Obviously, right.
simplest way to understand
Well,
prostitution
it's
and
interesting
pornography.
because I think that the motto of the porn industry and the motto of OnlyFans, I mean, the secret motto is go big or go home. You may join up thinking that you're going to do, the same thing with what Lana said. She joined and she hadn't really computed what she was going to have to do. And then 1 month later, 2 months later, she's, drinking urine out of a dog bowl and getting slapped and beaten and all of this kind of stuff, right? And, that go big or go home, if you want to make money in that industry, is you have to compete with what the hype is. And what the hype is in pornography now is the gonzo porn, right? Which Gail Dines has done so much, research into gonzo porn, which is where gonzo is when like gonzo journalism is when people go out into the field and they kind of experience it firsthand, like firsthand kind of journalism, right? So gonzo porn is actually, you are in the scene in a type of way. So you are sort of part of this experience. You are the third person in this, or sometimes 10th person, right? Because we know a lot of this stuff is, whatever. And it puts you there. And so it's an entirely different experience than if you were, for example, God forbid, a weirdo that was looking through, somebody's window and watching, a couple, right? That's what people kind of think about pornography, is that you're at the back looking at this. No. With gonzo porn, you are in the scene with them. And with OnlyFans, you're in it even more, because maybe you have this feeling, you've been talking to this girl for 3 months. Maybe she's really your girlfriend and she's giving you a girlfriend experience,
Yeah.
But the thing is, she's giving it to 20,000 or 25 or 100 other guys, right?
Yeah, the OnlyFans thing is really interesting because of that pseudo intimacy. So it makes the guy feel like he is having this one-on-one relationship with this girl. And, it seems to me that it would be like quite labor intensive for the
Oh,
girl or the woman on
absolutely.
the other end. I mean, she's engaging with all of these different guys and she has to have kind of different relationships with each of them based on what they want, and make that relationship seem kind of real and like, like she cares about him or like she's connecting, and at the same time having to
Right.
put on this phony personality. I mean, that's the other thing that is so ridiculous about these guys who are falling for
Well, you're also
Ayla's
kind of
act is that, they're she's providing a fantasy for them. Like this is what they want and she knows it. She knows what these people want. That's actually the major use and purpose of her polls and surveys, is that, she's essentially surveying her own clientele. She's
equity.
surveying her
Yeah.
own followers. So what
Yeah.
she's learning is what the people who pay her want, which is great for her. Like it's useful for her. It's not telling or revealing in terms of anything beyond that, I don't think. But she knows that she's been successful, very successful, and that guys are going for this particular act and this particular persona, and somehow these guys are still not catching on that that's what's going on.
On the hustle, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the other thing about OnlyFans, is that you're kind of in a way turning tricks, because you've got to speak with these guys, you've got to make them very interested in you, you've got to create a persona which is tailored to them. So maybe, and how emotionally exhausting is all of that, right? Yeah. And on the other end, these guys, I truly believe that they think that they are in a relationship with this particular person, right? Because they say to them, perhaps, right? I'm talking about the smaller creators, not the big ones. You might say, hey, I really want to see you, do X, Y, and Z, can you do it for me? So you're dreaming up these kind of fantasies in your mind. And in the kind of the regular world, what you may have is a couple, might say, hey, you want to do this? You want to try this? And they might say no, they might say yes, right? I mean, that's kind of a negotiation if you're, in a partnership with someone. But instead of that, which is just kind of, normal, you're saying, I want X, Y, and Z, and I want you to do it. What's the price? I'm going to pay it. It's it's you know, the objectification of women obviously is awful, but the exploitation of everybody else involved, and then on top of that, OnlyFans taking a cut of the, you know, of the profits
And
and
that's
the
20%, right? Is it 20% they're
20%.
taking? Yeah.
Yeah, serious money. I mean, you,
Yeah, that's a lot.
crazy. And also, the other way to make money on OnlyFans is even stranger, which is the pyramid scheme angle, which is that I get you, you sign up with my link, I get you on OnlyFans, I make a cut of your content, right? That's the other bit, which is really predatory, really predatory for me, because it's one thing to go onto a site, open up a page, and you know, you're kind of doing it, but the other angle is somebody saying to you, have you thought about opening up an OnlyFans? And also, I was watching an interview with Logan Paul when he's interviewing Summer Rae, who is like an Instagram model, and he was
Okay.
kind of like, you're such an idiot. You know, you're making these videos and you're not putting them on OnlyFans. Like, you're leaving money right on the table. And she's like, hang on, I don't want to open up an OnlyFans. Like, why are you telling me to get involved in an online nudity campaign, you know, for myself? Like, I don't want this. And he's like, you're an idiot. You know, you're leaving money right on the table. I'm like, do
Like,
OnlyFans
is this
know?
chick a porn star, or she's just a
No,
model?
she's
Oh,
just
so he's trying to convince her to get into porn. She's an
he's trying
idiot for
to,
not
he's
making money off of porn when she could be
he's like,
selling
you're an
porn
idiot.
to
You're
millions of
leaving money
men.
on the table. And she's like, she's like, I've got a little business online with my Instagram pictures, and I'm happy as a clam. I'm doing just fine on Instagram. And he's like, no, you need to think about getting into OnlyFans. And it was surreal. And I'm thinking, you know, I really can't understand it. But then that's the way that kind of world works of all of the YouTube stars, is that all of them have OnlyFans. So it's totally and utterly normalized, right? All of your friends have OnlyFans. A lot of the time, you know, you're speaking with these sort of people in the kind of 20 to 35 year age, and they're getting messages, text messages, and Facebook messages, and LinkedIn messages, and Twitter messages from people they went to high school with, saying, have you checked out my OnlyFans? Have you seen my OnlyFans? Please sign up to my OnlyFans. They're like, you know, Sarah, I haven't seen you in 20 years. I wondered how you were doing. Obviously, you're not doing great.
Yeah, that's so. I mean, that's just so foreign to me. Like, I mean, I'm aware that it's going on, but that's just not the kind of people I hang out with. I'm sure that's generational, but I have younger friends too. You know, I B in the live chat says, I just started seeing a guy who is anti-porn, which she's very excited about, and he keeps telling me how relieved he is that I don't have an OnlyFans or do sex work because of how common it is. Like, I guess this is so normalized in Gen Z, and I suppose I wonder a bit about, like, how the young men feel, like, about that. Like, how would
I
you
think they
feel if
feel
you were
devastated.
dating a chick who was on OnlyFans?
Well, that's another thing. I mean, you know, because I followed this so much and I get all of the alerts for OnlyFans, one time, you know, it was Mike Malak, who I actually like, I can't, you know, he very much annoys me, but he sort of said, you know, there will come a time, this is a kind of his exact words. He says, there will come a time when all of the options for wifedom have an OnlyFans. And he's like, everyone's going to have an OnlyFans in the end, you know, the first lady of the United States, you know, like Angela Merkel, everyone's going to have an OnlyFans. And he you know, and the other guys are like, shut up. Like, what are you saying? That's completely crazy. You know, that's nuts. And he's like, no. This is the future. This is, and then he's sort of right. I mean, you know, Denise Richards is on OnlyFans. Denise Richards is like, what age is she? She's 50. I thought she would know better, to be honest. You know, that she's on OnlyFans selling her pictures. I just, you know, I feel sad, to be honest, you know, that she's doing
Yeah. It's very depressing, and, you know, I guess I just these guys, maybe you can actually explain who these guys are and talk about them a little bit more in terms of their relationship to pornography. Like, these guys, you were the one that turned me on to what they were doing and who they were.
Mhm.
And I watched some videos with Logan Paul Mike, who I said his last name wrong. What is his last name?
Malak.
Malak. And Hassan Piker, is that his name? Yeah.
Yeah.
And, these guys are making tons of money off of
They're
Twitch or
millionaires.
YouTube. And for them and they have these audiences that are full of quite young men, as I understand it, even teenagers, right?
Well, Logan Paul is formerly, I mean, I do believe now, the 8 to kind of 14-year-old market, right? He was doing things, I'm thinking back in the day, doing vlogs, kind of innocuous vlogs, where he would do kind of like, stunts, pranks and stunts and whatever, right? And then all of a sudden, overnight, he said, well, my audience has changed. No, you have 20 million users you have 20 million followers on YouTube. It's the same followers you've had from day one. So the idea that imagine you have a kid who's 8 years old and you give him a phone or a tablet and he's watching Logan Paul do stupid stunts in Venice, right? You're like, okay, this is stupid, whatever, but it's, harmless idiocy. And then 2 years later, so your 8-year-old is now 10, he's talking about how to prepare for an anal sex scene with Riley Reid. And, I don't care if you put a big warning at the beginning, which he did. I credit him with, he did put a warning at the beginning. But to be honest, I think that just entices the young boys in even more. No young boy is going to go, oh, Logan Paul said this is very graphic and sexual, I'm going to turn this the hell off. No, they're going to say, this is fascinating.
I'm not allowed to watch this.
I'm not allowed to watch this, right? Exactly. And you, as a parent or a carer or a guardian or whatever, you've already got in your mind, well, Logan Paul is just a clown, that's showing my kid, stupid stunts and whatever. It's and I'm actually thinking, no, this is so it's so twisted. It is so twisted to be talking because what I call it is adult content for children. So you're creating, in my opinion, right? Don't come for me. You're creating porn for kids, and that is what I think. Like David Dobrik is another one of these very big YouTubers, millionaire, successful, all the rest of it. God bless him. Really, good luck to you, right? You're creating this, content. People are really, really gravitating to it and loving it. But what he does is he gets porn stars, and he knows his audience is very young. He gets porn stars and he puts them in the thumbnail. You won't believe what she was willing to do for $10 is like, whatever the caption, or one day in the life of a porn star, and it's Riley Reid. And Riley Reid is not creating a couple of boob pictures online. She has got the 8 men, gangbangs. I mean, the really graphic stuff. So you're seeing him on, let's say, David Dobrik, right? And you're a 12-year-old, and he's got a very kind of fun, fast-paced kind of vlog. And then you're saying, oh, hang on, Riley Reid is in the title. Maybe I'll Google her. And well, that's a whole other story. There is so much. And if you're, a working mother over the age of 35, you don't have time to investigate all of this online and see, okay, this is bad. You're sort of just kind of trusting, you're trusting YouTube in many ways. You're trusting Twitch in many ways. You're trusting you're trusting your kid as well. And I think that is one of the major reasons why this has become so popular, is through pushing this type of content through YouTube to a younger audience, to essentially children.
Yeah, I mean, these guys have definitely like made it cool and like normalized to, they brag about and, big each other up for having slept with a lot of porn stars and hanging out with a lot of porn stars. And I'm not saying like don't hang out with or sleep with porn stars, but they've normalized it to the point where people don't think about prostitution and pornography as anything at all. They don't think about it as anything negative, which is weird because, again, like if you look at pornography, to me, it's so obviously violent and disturbing. And these sex acts are, I'm sorry, they're disgusting. Like, I don't want to look at any of these things. whenever I'm trying to do research on porn, I just like can barely even handle it. So I'm just like, I don't want to look at this. This is gross. I fully don't understand the appeal. But I remember when Mike was talking about Lana Rhodes, this is when they were still dating. This was a video that I was watching on YouTube on Logan Paul's channel. And, you know, they were like, oh, you must have been really stressed out and nervous when you were going to sleep with her because she's this porn star. So, you know, she can do everything. And it's like having sex with like an acrobat. And like, you were probably really nervous because like she's been with all these guys. Like, they thought it was like, the ideas that they have about porn stars are so naive
Right.
and
So
warped, which is
skewed.
weird considering how much time they spend in that world and watching pornography. Because, you know, of course, Lana came out of the industry saying, I don't like sex. I have no sexual desire. I'm not attracted to anybody. I don't hook
Yeah,
up with
yeah. She's
anybody.
asexual. She's like
Like,
not. I mean,
like
that's
women in the
wild.
porn industry don't like porn. Like, or
Right.
sorry, they don't like sex. Like women in prostitution, so many women have told me this. Both women who are in prostitution as, you know, like high-end escorts, for example, as well as if you talk to or listen to women who've exited prostitution, who've exited porn, they'll always tell you, you know, it fully turned me off of sex. Like I didn't want to have
Right.
sex with anyone. This isn't about, again, nymphomaniacs, and they bigged up Lana in the same way that these guys had done with Ayla, which is to say, you know, like she came from this really hard background. She had all this trauma. She had this hard life, and she really pulled it together and made a ton of money in porn. Isn't that great?
Well, I find that absolutely insane. That you know, it's kind of like I was, you know, half dead on the bathroom floor from my, you know, Percocet overdose, but I pulled, you know, because I'm a victim of, you know, whatever, and I pulled it together, and now I'm on a OnlyFans. I mean, that's really what, you know, Lana. And by the way, like she actually said that she left the industry with something like 400. She didn't leave the industry with like $1 billion. She left the industry with not a lot of money herself in her bank account. And now that she doesn't actually want to do porn, what the porn industry, what the pushers of the porn industry have decided to do to her is to essentially drag her out into the public square and humiliate her. You know, say what a, you know, base. I'm paraphrasing. They're basically saying, what a dumb slut. You knew what you're getting into. You loved it when you were making it. How dare you try to, you know, take it back and say it wasn't good? Like, you know, what she did some work with another YouTube star, No Jumper, who is his name is escaping me. He makes porn with his girlfriend called Lana, the plug Adam 22. That's his name. And he's like a guy, 35, 36, and he is absolutely berating Lana for, you know, basically speaking out against the industry, saying, you know, because it hurts his brands. Now he has all of this content with her, and now everybody knows that she hated it. So that really hurts the value of the content, that people are not going to want to see it as much. You know, once you know she hated every second of this, she was practically gagging, she wanted to die, and now she hates the industry, that really affects your ability to sell your $5 video or your $10 video on OnlyFans, because he's done a lot of content with her, with his girlfriend. And now I think that devalues it quite a bit. And when you look at the reaction of the porn, the only people who are standing up for people like Lana Rhodes are feminists and you know, anti-porn activists. The porn industry themselves has basically said, you dumb whore, how dare you, you know, you signed the contract, you're not able to change your mind about this. And they're also kind of saying, you're still making money off of this, so you shouldn't be able, you can't kind of do a delete button. And that's the other thing. When you're thinking about opening up an OnlyFans, you need to say to yourself, this is like getting a tattoo on my face. This is as serious as getting a tattoo on your face, right? You will probably never be able to take this back. And this will seriously affect the way that you look at yourself and that other people look at you. And it will totally change your life in a massive way, because how can you have a 9 to 5, boyfriend, live-in boyfriend, and at the same time you're chatting with, 50 guys online and selling them pictures? And I've spoken to women, by the way, who are still selling pictures of their feet, right, online. And that's a big thing. That's a huge myth, that you're able to make $1 million off of this. I speak to women and they're saying, I'm making $400 a month, $500 a month, but I have to buy props. I have to, do fancy pedicures and buy jewelry and buy a background and all the rest of it. So in the end, you come back with, $200 from kind of doing this. And eventually everybody will find out. It's not possible for you to have an OnlyFans and for you to keep it a secret from, other people.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today, which is that consent thing. Because what happens is that these guys and the porn industry treat payment as consent. So they can turn around and say to Lana, you, too bad, sorry, you signed the contract, you got paid, you have no right to speak out against this now, you can't take it back. Certainly we're going to keep your content out there and keep making millions of dollars off of it. And you don't get to change your mind with pornography,
right,
or with OnlyFans. And it's really maddening to watch these guys talk about consent as though it's the only ethical standard. That's what we saw
right.
when this whole AI deepfake scandal went
Mm-hmm.
down on Twitch, which is that Atrioc, the guy who was caught watching the deepfake porn during a stream, he did this apology video and he's crying and he's like, this is so awful, I'm so sorry, like, this isn't a pattern of behavior, I'll never do this again. I was just on watching regular porn. I was just on regular Pornhub watching regular porn, and then these ads pop up on these videos, and so I clicked on them, and that's how I ended up in this deep fake wormhole watching my friend's AI deep fake porn.
That was the craziest
As
thing about
though,
it.
like, I was like, wait a minute, and the reason that he's understanding that it's bad is because it's non-consensual, and it is bad, and it is non-consensual, and it's really gross and creepy. But what do these guys think is happening in the regular porn that they're watching? I mean, they're thinking,
Right,
oh, they got paid, so it's okay. And this is
right.
what all these guys repeated after the fact, including
Mm.
Hassan Piker, including Mike,
Well,
who are saying, well, it's just, I mean, you didn't consent, like you weren't even paid. So, like,
right. Yeah, that was crazy. That was, Hassan Piker also, he does this kind of Marxist analysis of the porn industry.
I mean,
And he's kind of like,
very,
well,
very unintelligent Marxist analysis.
he says, well, they're controlling the means of production if they have, an OnlyFans, and you're basically you're kind of this idea of you're taking like kind of the fame away from the original girl who was in it, who's now not going to become, she's not going to be hyped up, and it's their face, and she didn't even get paid for this, she's not even making money on it. And that's one of the issues here. And I think that one of the things that truly baffles me and will continue to baffle me, I think, for years, is this pseudo-Marxist analysis of the porn industry. This idea that OnlyFans is a way to control the means of production and kind of have, I really just feel like it's a complete, you can't take, Marxist analysis and lift it up and just plop it down in the porn industry and say, okay, this is, changing the power structure here, right? And the thing about the deep fake that really kind of got to me is nobody has kind of said this is like a digital rape, right? And what I feel that we're going to see more and more of is actually the ability to not only have, the girl's face be somebody else, but you also have the ability to have the guy's face be you, right? So you're going to, be able to create essentially a scene of you having sex with, I don't know, your coworker, and none of this has ever happened, but you're kind of feeling like you've had this experience because you've created it, you've watched it, and it's sort of taking a fantasy and actually digitally making it happen. And I do think it's a form of digital rape, and that's why she was, this girl was so really, really upset, and there was so much outrage about it. But there was really no outrage about the actual porn industry itself. It just,
not at all. And in fact, most of these people, including the women, sadly, said, caveat, like, I support sex work, but this, you can't do things without women's consent, which, really goes to show the problem with that non-analysis that says anything goes so long as someone's signed a contract or been paid. That, equates to consent, regardless of whether or not they decide after the fact that they don't want that stuff out there on the internet. Too bad. But that they can't even, and QT Cinderella, the woman who was most upset over these deep fakes, whose face we saw all over the internet crying in her response stream. She's been somebody who's said in the past, she's spoken out against sexualization on Twitch. She spoke out against these like hot tub streams that I guess were happening, because she said, this isn't just about you. This impacts all of the women on Twitch. This impacts me, because when a guy is looking at these like super sexualized streams where these girls practically have their tits out or do have their tits out, and then they're looking at me and they're like, why don't you take your tits out? Like, where's the hot tub stream? Like, it's normalizing it, and it's sort of upping the ante. And I think that's what a lot of this OnlyFans stuff has done, and this normalization of selling nudes and this normalization of pornography, wherein girls and young women, when they're with guys, think that they have to perform like porn stars to keep up, or think they need an OnlyFans to keep up, or think they have to send nudes to keep up. And none of that's true. You don't have to. Like, no guy's going to dump you because you don't send him nudes. I mean, and if he did, what a disgusting piece of shit.
Yeah, like, you don't want to be with that person.
Like, I don't think that most men in the long term, like, it might be tittillating at first, but in the long term, most guys aren't going to want a girlfriend who's in porn or has an OnlyFans.
Of course. And this bit goes back again, I think, to the kind of the statistic that I spoke to you about in our podcast, which was that 28% of men between the age of 18 and 30 are not having sex. They haven't had sex in the last year. So that is quite astounding, that you have 28%, nearly a third of the male population between 18 and 30 are not engaging in any form of relationship sexually with anybody. So that kind of is really kind of a massive glimpse into how, and especially I think lockdown as well, the kind of the lockdown and the COVID thing, it really amped all of this up, because everybody was completely forced to stay in their houses. A million girls got on OnlyFans, 120 million users got on OnlyFans, right? And started to engage in these kind of pseudo relationships. And Walid Hassan is asking something about the concept of, is porn free speech, right? And I don't even think that's particularly the question, because we have stuff that is considered free speech that we have decided as a society we just shouldn't say. Like, that's why I can't, could I theoretically walk down the street with a t-shirt with racial slurs on it? Perhaps, that might be covered with a free speech. But should I do it? No, because as a society, we have decided that is entirely inappropriate, and we're not going to do it. And socially, you will face repercussions, if you want to walk down the street with a sign with racial slurs on it.
I mean, the free speech question, that is porn free speech question, I feel like, I mean, it has been framed as free speech in a legal context in some places in the US. And I just, I understand that that's true, that that's a thing that happened to, prevent censorship of porn magazines. But it doesn't actually make sense logically. Porn isn't words, it isn't speech. There are real women, real women's bodies who are being used and abused in many cases, who are being subject to physical abuse. I mean, I still am always baffled at how these things are legal.
Right.
Like I'm not sure why it's legal to, or it's okay to choke a woman or slap her or spit on her or injure her just because she's being filmed and the video is being sold. But I also find that a lot of the isn't porn free speech thing comes from people who are trying to turn this around onto the women and to accuse women like us who are critical of the sex industry of sort of oppressing the women. So
Right.
people, often men, but not always men, will say to me, like, well, doesn't she have the right to do that? And I'm like, yeah, she does have the right to do that. I'm not trying to take her right to do anything away. First of all, I'm not trying to take, like I'm just speaking critically about this. I think she shouldn't be doing this. But what I'm mostly critical of is the abuse that's happening to her.
Of course. And
It's like who would be arrested
yeah,
in a domestic abuse scenario? Like the
yeah.
woman who decided to stay in a relationship with a man who beat her or the man who beat her. Like it's the guy who's perpetrating the violence. It's the man who's exploiting. It's the person who's profiting from this abuse. Like that's the problem. I also have a problem with people who are promoting this stuff and normalizing this stuff, though I'm not suggesting they go to jail.
Absolutely not. And I think also, like Walid Hassan makes a great, makes poses to us a great question about engaging in this concept of, well, you want to shut down free speech. No, no, no. I just want to talk about the facts here. That the average career cycle for a girl in pornography is 3 to 6 months. So men can have pretty long careers in pornography. A couple of years, 10 years, whatever. That's not unheard of. But girls typically have a span of 3 to 6 months, and then they're out of the industry because their bodies cannot tolerate what is happening to them. If you go on to, I don't want to promote this website, but if you go on to facial abuse, just take a look. Just don't even watch it. Just take a look at just take a look at the thumbnails for these pictures, right? And this website is very, very popular, that you have women who, the most degrading stuff. And what they also do in this website is they talk to you before they film it, and they find out if you were abused as a child, or if you were subjected to, racial discrimination because you're a Latina immigrant, right? They take whatever you're telling them in your kind of before interview, and then during the scene where the talent is the man is there, they're beating the woman and saying to her, things like, am I abusing you like your uncle used to? I mean, just crazy emotion. And the whole idea of it is to emotionally damage her. But I also think it emotionally damages these viewers. And then when you go out into the relationship space, you find that a lot of the women are not, that's something actually that Rachel Moran spoke about, was that after internet pornography came about, a lot of the girls on the street didn't actually understand what the punters wanted from them, because they had seen so much porn and they were asking for this stuff, and the women didn't even know really what they were talking about, because it was so completely, because in the 90s, you want to think about it, prostitution was just you pay a girl for sex, right? And then when the internet age came about, you have these men with these very elaborate requests, that want to do stuff that they've seen on these websites, and the women, it's like a foreign language. I mean, it is a foreign language, because when I talk to people who are not involved in this space and I talk about facial abuse and abuse porn, they don't really understand what I'm even saying. For them it's very kind of ephemeral. They have like that movie with Nicolas Cage, what was it, Eight? They have kind of those types of ideas in their mind, right? So I think with Lex Friedman, I don't know, what was your opinion of that podcast? It was really hard for me to get through.
Yeah. So Lex Friedman, I mean, first of all, I was pretty surprised that he had Ayla on his podcast, because she's not a particularly interesting person, although these guys seem to think she's very fascinating. And again, I think it's because she's separated herself from the pack, as it were, by, sort of becoming, this is, somebody else framed it to me in this way. I'm not going to name her, but I don't want to take credit for this because I think it was smart, as sort of like a modern courtesan. So she's created a role for herself as sort of this like high class escort, and she can engage in these like intellectual conversations with these sort of elite men, and she's not portraying herself as somebody who's being degraded, or humiliated, or put through these kind of embarrassing acts. She's definitely portraying herself as acting independently. She's an independent agent, and she is, as far as I know. And I suppose I'm a bit surprised that otherwise intelligent men fall for it, because they can decide that she's not just a regular, these are not my words, not just a regular like stupid hoe,
Yeah, just a
basically.
stupid whore.
Yeah, she's not an idiot. She's got, this is an intellectual pursuit for her. This is an art. And also, she loves sex, and she loves anal sex. And I'm trying not to like swear constantly, but it's hard in these kinds of conversations. And he introduces her, he shares the link to this episode on his Twitter saying that she's a sex researcher, which she's not. And he should know better. A sex researcher is an actual thing. It's a scientist who studies sex and human sexuality. And that she does all these amazing, she's this world-class, she's doing all these like psychological studies, and her surveys he described them as, you're world class. Like, it's really amazing. You're really incredible. And I'm like, you did. I mean, I'm sure that it takes time and intelligence for her to compile all this data and put these graphs together. But still, what she did is she created polls and surveys, and she surveyed her followers, again, who are all porn consumers, and who, I read a bunch of her findings and her data in terms of this big kink survey that she did. They appear to all be Gen Z. Almost all of them started watching pornography around sometime between like 11 and 13, which is not normal for any other generation. Because, the only reason that first of all, they're watching it, so they're looking online. I didn't have the internet when I was a kid. The older millennials didn't either. And, so these people have already normalized kink and pornography. Some of what she seems like she was trying to do was, first of all, she comes at these surveys with an assumption that everybody enjoys and watches porn and has kinks and has fetishes and, is interested in some various forms of violence. And she asks these questions like, and I think she also has set out trying to prove in some way that kinks are things that people are born with, like it doesn't come from either childhood experiences or trauma or directly from pornography, which is weird because to me,
Of
it
course,
seems
yeah.
very clear that most of these kinks and fetishes nowadays have come from pornography because people weren't so into these practices pre-internet porn.
Go, by the way, go to Reddit hypnosissy porn and you just find a whole bunch of guys who literally say that their lives were completely destroyed from pornography. Reddit hypnosissy porn. These guys are very, very honest about what's happening to them, what's happened. And it would be interesting to survey some of them, and ask them, because they're if a lot of their lives are like a complete wreck, really. After they got hooked on this stuff. And I think also, another one, I kind of, the Lex Friedman podcast was difficult to get through, but what it so reminded me of? It so reminded me of Belle de Jour, Brooke Magnanti, who is another kind of intellectual scientist, happy hooker, kind of, she's walking around kind of, very libertarian, happy hookering all around. And she is a scientist, an actual scientist. Now she's a PhD scientist. So she has that kind of edge of credibility. And Julie Bindel is sort of someone who said, she was a tourist really in the porn industry. She was not in the porn industry, in the sex industry. She was a tourist. She was in and out in like 1 year, very, very kind of high class. It was all for her, like glamorous, kind of, red lipstick and fancy hotel rooms and silk sheets. But, it's interesting because Rachel Moran always says it really doesn't matter if your arse is scratching up against a pavement or satin sheets, that the act is completely, kind of like the same. But I think these women serve such a powerful purpose because you can take these women who are well put together, well spoken, and kind of plaster them absolutely everywhere. I mean, Belle de Jour, Brooke Magnanti, had such a powerful a TV series about her and her experiences. And I think it was Space International said that they had received a lot of emails and letters from girls who got into the industry after seeing this glamorized TV show in the 2000s about Brooke Magnanti, Belle de Jour, and her glamorous life as a prostitute.
I mean, it's the whole happy hooker narrative, the pretty woman thing, but it's even so much more widespread and normalized now, again, because we talked about it, it's all of these streamers, people on YouTube, and then these women like Ella who are being propped up by these guys as representative of something. And she's representative of nothing. She's representative of like the tiny, 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 tiniest minority of people in the sex trade. And,
well, again,
and she makes excuses for herself by saying like, oh, well, I know maybe like I'm not necessarily like normal women, but at the same time, you're selling OnlyFans because, like Lex Friedman asks her these, very deep questions like, like, so like, you made $100,000 on OnlyFans. How did that feel? It feels great. It feels amazing. And these guys will ask her like, so like, how do you like porn? Do you like porn? Do you think it's good? Oh yeah, I love it. It's great. And it just it seems cool and fun. It seems cooler and more fun to have that sort of relationship to pornography versus a relationship that you and I might have to pornography where we think it's disgusting. I mean, nobody wants it. You don't want to be repulsed by something. You don't want to be disturbed by something. You don't want to be upset by something. You don't want to have to argue with people constantly. You don't want to have conversations with every man you date about why it's not appropriate for him to watch pornography. Like that's not that fun.
It's also, okay, there's two narratives going on here. There's the average girl who makes $176 a month on OnlyFans. She is portrayed in the wider culture, as an idiot. You joined OnlyFans and you make, and that, by the way, that's the average amount that somebody makes on OnlyFans is, $176, right? So she's an idiot, okay, on the one hand. There's no podcast for her. She's not on Lex Friedman getting interviewed, the girl that made $176 a month on OnlyFans. But if you make $100,000 on OnlyFans, you're a badass bitch. right?
Yeah.
You're not like these kind of, sad sack girls that are not making any money. But it's well, it's actually completely the same. It's one person has had a mixture of fame and luck and notoriety and has managed to do very, very well and ascend up the ladder in OnlyFans, and the other girl is stuck, talking to these guys, sending them pictures that they're asking for, and living this kind of very dark and miserable and sad life. And those stories about, the truth about OnlyFans are everywhere. You can't move for them. If you look for them online, the truth about OnlyFans, right? And these girls that are talking out, there's so many YouTube videos, there's so many articles. You can't move for testimonies from people who are saying, this is not good, I made a mistake.
Yeah. So, and not only does it's great advertising for OnlyFans, which is, I was really glad that you mentioned in the podcast that we did a few weeks ago. You said, like, I have a problem even with people who are taking their paychecks from OnlyFans
Oh,
because
absolutely.
the kinds of content, you're profiting off of. And in this case, she's advertising and supporting this company that engages and profits from some really, really dark stuff.
Mhm.
And including trafficking. Like there's no aspect of the sex trade, from stripping to pornography to prostitution to OnlyFans to camming that trafficking isn't a part of.
Of course, it's always a part of it,
People,
right?
especially these like sex work people, like to say, well, that's trafficking, this is sex work, as though
Well,
it's not all, connected and
well,
colliding at all times.
Megan, it's interesting you're saying that, because if you are pro sex work and you are a shill for the industry, and if you're part of the pimp lobby, then what they call sex trafficking, they reword it and it becomes migration for sex work, right? You're migrating for the purpose of sex work. And that is spoken about quite a lot. Migration for sex work is,
It's just like how you move to another city for a job.
right, exactly. I got a high paying job in the city. No, migration for sex work, right? But the thing about, okay, so you're kind of mentioning about people that take their checks from the porn industry, right? Right. Okay, so I kind of see it like this. If you are let's say you have two drug dealers, one of them is standing outside of a school trying to give crack to kids, and let's say you're a person that just sells cocaine to your friends at parties, right? It's the same, you're still involved in the drug industry, which is, contributing to the deaths of people. You can say, well, no, it's not the same because I am just buying cocaine from my friends, right? No, it's like it is the kind of the same. You are still involved in this in this larger industry, and that's how you make your money. And by the way, I'm not talking about people that, like, whatever, buy trucks recreationally and kind of bring it to parties. I'm talking about someone that is making a living from selling cocaine to their
Right.
wider kind of friend group, right? So I find it so difficult because I was having sort of an argument online with Gays Against Groomers because I like them, I like what they're doing, but I cannot get over the fact that 3 of their members have on OnlyFans and 3 of their members are taking money from the porn industry. I just can't get my mind about that. How can you be anti-grooming and at the same time pro, like, your members who are very prominent having an OnlyFans? Surely you have to do a line in the sand and say we're against this stuff, but it gets so completely muddled and mixed up because it's all about no, we're against, drag queen story hour for kids, but we're okay with OnlyFans. I can't marry those two ideas in my head, to be honest.
Right.
And if you're taking checks from the porn industry, then I think that you are contributing to this wider problem. Your employer essentially is responsible for X amount of cases of, revenge porn being posted. Your employer is responsible for massive amounts of prostitution, massive amounts of child porn, and we know that Pornhub is saturated with child porn. You can't move for it, right?
Yeah.
So you're taking, that's the people you're taking your checks from. So this is not a victimless crime here. to engage in this industry in kind of like any type of way. And I don't want to shame the women who get groomed and kind of groomed by the wider society, right? Because porn grooms us all, right?
Or even, like there's women who went in so naively, again, to go back to Lana Rhodes' situation.
Oh,
She's talked
absolutely.
about this publicly. And it's strange because I actually read an interview that she did for Playboy magazine, and they tell this whole story. And she's, open about the fact that she went into pornography literally having no idea that she was going to have sex with anybody. Like, that's not what she thought. Like, she was super naive, and she'd watch The Girls Next Door on TV, and she saw these Playboy models, these playmates who she just thought were really beautiful and living these glamorous lives. And she was like, oh, I want to be sexy and beautiful. I want to look like that. I want to have this life. Like, she truly did not know what was going to be expected of her in pornography, and certainly
Right.
not what she was going to be pressured into. And
And then you
most
become
girls and
public
women who go
property.
into porn and prostitution are young. Like, if not underage, they're,
Right.
like 18 years old. I mean, this whole barely legal genre is so repulsive in a variety of ways. I mean, even if these chicks are 18, I think that adult men who are like 40, 50 years old watching / engaging in sex acts with 18-year-old girls is totally disgusting and unethical. Like, she's
Right.
barely not a teenager. But on top of that, they're made up to look like girls, either
Teddy
teenagers
bears. Yeah.
or little
Teddy bears in
girls.
pajamas.
And they're supposed to have like these childlike voices. And
Mm.
this is one of the most popular genres in porn. And then we have people like Ayla and these guys, propping her up and supporting her. And she's saying, well, what's wrong with barely legal porn? What's wrong with incest porn? And saying things like, she said to Lex Friedman on his podcast, actually, like, I think he asked her something like, what's good about porn? And she's like, well, I think, was this on Lex Friedman's podcast or another interview? I hope I'm not getting this wrong. You know, what do you think about porn? I like it. It's great. And then she says, one of the good things about porn, she goes, well, it probably reduces rates of rape because these guys who are really horny have an outlet.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I mean, honestly, it tickles me.
Like, it's helping. She also has said that she thinks it's helping marriages because, like, otherwise these guys who aren't getting enough sex from their wives would be so
Right.
miserable, or they'd be cheating, as though that doesn't constitute cheating. Like,
Right.
having a relationship with a chick on OnlyFans, that's fucking cheating. That's cheating. I think using pornography is cheating. You're engaging in
Right.
sex acts with other women. Like, you're not physically touching your body, but
Yeah, well,
like,
I think also, you have endless stories now about women who are kind of saying like that, like porn really ruined their marriage. And you get this a lot with a lot of the kind of the I want to say like the manosphere kind of people, like the Lotus Eaters, for example, Carl Benjamin. I think he talks about it quite a lot. That the kind of the sort of the men that really are like addicted to this stuff, and that it prevents them from having a successful relationship with women because they're totally preoccupied. It's actually much easier to have a virtual girlfriend, right? A virtual girlfriend, she's probably not going to dump you. She's not going to criticize you for, like losing your job.
She's not going to say
Or
anything mean to you, like,
never.
unless you're playing some kind of role-playing thing. She's
Mm.
not going to judge you. She's not going to shame you. She's not going to have any expectations. You don't need to be accountable for anything. Like, it's nothing like a real relationship.
Nothing like a real relationship, right?
And yet it's
And
distracting them from having a real relationship.
yeah, of course. I mean, so Waleed is kind of making another comment here and saying that the majority of women that most men interact with is through porn. I mean, I don't really know. I don't really know if that is the case, but I think I listen. I think now with the deep fake scandal, what has really happened is that people are asking a lot of questions about the ethics of this material, but they're not asking any of the wider questions to do with this at all, right? They're talking about how, this is unethical because she didn't consent and blah, blah, blah. But once you create pornography, and we saw this with Pamela Anderson, and because I just recently watched her Netflix show, once you create porn, and by the way, she didn't create porn, she created Playboy pictures and centerfolds, right? Once you do that, you are public property, and the wider culture treats you like absolute shit because she had her private video stolen and put on the internet, and the reaction from people was sort of like, well, you've done a Playboy picture, so therefore why should you really care? And it's like, well, she cares because this is really a digital rape that happened there, that she's I honestly, I can't even imagine how she got over that. And then if we look at what happened to her in the years, that came after that, she didn't have a career. She was a joke. She was a punchline. And the same thing kind of happened. I mean, like with Paris Hilton, for example. When her sex tape came out, she was 18 years old. Okay. Just think about that for a moment, that she was 18 years old and that she had this kind of very private moment sold on the internet for absolutely everybody to see, and it's there forever, and she didn't consent to it. But it was being sold like in video shops, it was being sold on like street corners one night in Paris. I mean, this is an 18-year-old girl we're talking about here.
Yeah. Somebody in the comments says Pam Anderson was molested, raped, and gang raped before posing for Playboy.
Yeah, she mentioned that in her new Netflix documentary.
I mean,
which, by
this
the way,
is sorry.
yeah, but she's an anti-porn activist now. She comes at me. She does a lot. I mean, she does her PETA stuff. She does a lot of her animal rights stuff. But she's also talking about porn. She's talking about it from many angles. She's also saying that she was, married to men who were, she's kind of like a hopeless romantic. She's had tons of husbands. But she said like she was married to men who were in the bathroom watching porn instead of like spending time with her. And this is Pam Anderson, right? She's like still a knockout at like 50, whatever. And she's saying like that made me feel cheap and degraded and sad and lonely, and questioning like, what is wrong with me that I'm not enough? Like, why doesn't he want to come and have the physical experience with me instead of like going to the bathroom and watching porn?
It's so interesting because people who do defend porn will often say, like, well, what about these guys who are in marriages and they're, not getting sex, or their wives are mean to them or whatever? Or what about these guys who are lonely, they're socially inept, they can't find a relationship? And, certainly those kinds of men do use porn and are on OnlyFans. And it is sad, and it's hurting their lives, and it's not helping them get better. But then, of course, there's, these guys who are, rich and famous and in a relationship or married to someone like Pam Anderson, one of the hottest women in the world at the time, and they're still using pornography. I mean, that's just not how porn and prostitution work. And I mean, I say this often, and I think it's a universal truth. I think it should be honest or obvious, but also if you just listen to women in and out of the industry to talk about their backgrounds. I mean, you just said they did this as, a preview to this facial abuse, Gonzo porn kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
They'll always tell these stories of molestation and trauma and rape. And, it's so many of these people, men and women in the industry, have really serious mental health issues and issues with addiction. And Ella came from a super abusive household. She talks about this, and I'm not trying to like use her past against her, but this is an important piece of the narrative around porn and prostitution, that a lot of, if not all, girls and women who get into these industries have been groomed in a variety of ways, which includes being molested, being sexualized when they're young, having trauma, being disconnected from their bodies and from their sexualities, being accustomed or used to or expecting men to treat them in abusive ways, I'm having really low self-esteem, and a low sense of self-worth. So she came from this really abusive household, and is clearly, if you just watch her speaking, but also if you listen to her interviews, I've watched and listened to and read more than several interviews with her now, and she's very clearly and openly disconnected from emotions. She thinks of herself not even as fully human, and says, I'd like to not be human. When she talks about the idea of having babies, she talks about wanting to use a surrogate. Like, she's completely disattached from her body. And it's strange to me that these guys don't make those connections and see, oh, this is somebody with mental issues and with trauma. And that's why she sort of can do this and say these things. And who knows what she'll, reflect back on and say,
Right.
10, 20 years
10, 20 years, right.
down the road. But the fact that these women are so often traumatized and come from backgrounds of rape and sexual assault, I think is really significant in terms of who gets into the industry and why, and like how much you really can consent when you're coming from a place of trauma and then being re-traumatized in that same way over and over and over again.
Right. And also, I mean, if anybody wants to understand more like about the porn industry, take a look at The Truth About Deep Throat, which was the truth about, this porn movie that came out, Deep Throat, that was like a massive scandal. People were like going absolutely wild over it, had massive hype, had the Barbra Streisand effect. And now you have both the man and the woman coming out who, childhood full of trauma, full of issues, full of just every horrible ghastly thing you could ever imagine. Then they have this video come out, and then they talk about what happened later and next in their lives. And it is really just a tiny kind of peephole into the kind of the life and the experience of this industry. And that's why they have to change their name. That's why Lana Rhodes is not really Lana Rhodes, right? Her name is actually different. And Riley Reid is another one who says, like, it's a character. So, but all the time she's in this character. So when she's on a podcast, she's in this character.
Who's Riley Reid? Can you talk about?
So,
I'm not familiar with this person.
Riley Reid is another very, very, very famous girl who has been women who has been in pornography for I think about 10 years, which is almost kind of unheard of in the industry. She is massive because she is another kind of these Lana Rhodes characters who really will, like, I don't want to be cruel, but really will do anything. I mean, it's just, sex with multiple partners, being slapped, being this. I mean, could you just imagine it? Like, there's 8 men and Riley Reid, this kind of small, petite girl, just the kind of the carnage of that, right? In your mind. And so then she goes on to Logan Paul's podcast and David Dobrik's vlogs, and she's fully in character, fully in her Riley Reid character. And these guys are saying to her things like, how, so Riley, would you fuck my friend? And she's in the Riley Reid character. So she's like, absolutely, no problem. He is so hot. And she even says, reflecting on it afterwards, they pressured me. They made me feel weird. I was in my Riley Reid character. Like, I didn't feel comfortable. Like, I'm like she's kind of sort of saying, like, I'm okay with doing this sort of flirty character, but you're actually asking me now to like have sex with your friends. And this is all on tape. I mean, this is all in vlogs that you can see to this day. The kind of just the like the shame that is put on her, and that imagine that kind of social situation. Somebody has a camera in your face, and you're this porn star that people have seen you do everything, so therefore they just treat you like a piece of absolute, human trash. And humiliate you for fun.
Yeah. But also they think that that's who you really are. Like, they don't seem to realize that that's a character and that these women are playing a role. So they think that what they're doing in porn is also what they are doing in real life, or what should or could be expected of them in real life.
Absolutely. And I also feel that she's another person I feel that is about 1 year or 2 years away from coming out against the industry, right? There's kind of like all the signs sort of like are already there. She just had a baby, she's become a mother. And that's the other thing, after Lana Rhodes announced that she was pregnant, all you had was this tirade, this typhoon of misogyny that was just chucked her way. Oh, can you imagine her giving birth, because she's, done this and done that, like that baby's just going to slip out. I mean, people saying the most vile, disgusting stuff about her and her baby and becoming a mother and all of this stuff. And the same thing happened with, Riley Reid, who again is like a very, very famous porn star. And the reaction from people, it's almost a disappointment, right? Because now you become a mom, you're a little bit less kind of, fuckable, I think, in a way. And so these men, I think, were very disappointed that she had decided to become a baby, because it actually, it kind of humanizes her. It humanizes her. She's not just this character. She's a real person who is having a real human experience, having a baby, one of the most human experiences you can ever do. And I think that the reaction of all of the kind of like the online misogyny, and was very visible, is a disappointment, that you've let me down. It's the same thing with Riley Reid when she doesn't want to, fuck this guy in the vlog. You've let me down. You've disappointed me, because my expectations for you are for you to be X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I just Googled and I just saw that Eric Weinstein had interviewed Riley Reid.
Good Lord.
How that interview went. But it's like, I think that these guys want porn to be more about human sexuality than it actually is. Like, I think that they think that this is like some kind of psychological pursuit rather than...
Yeah, they love putting on a monocle and going, so tell me about the time that you...
Yeah, like, this is just so fascinating.
Yeah, so fascinating with my monocle.
Like, how did you feel about this kink? And it's like, this is just all a fantasy. And again, it's just, I know that I sound like I'm on repeat, but there's just so much exploitation and abuse and trafficking in this industry. It's not fun and cute and glamorous. I mean, women suffer all sorts of horrific injuries in porn, from anal prolapse and vaginal tears and
horrendous injuries.
Yeah.
And lest we remember is bringing up something really interesting. Here she says, also to these men, she was never supposed to be a mother. She was meant to be fucked with no result. Now they're reminded of what sex is actually for, and they're mad. Totally true. Big, big, big time true.
Yeah, it's, and it's funny because it's, people have responded to me and said, and they did so recently in response to the article that I wrote about the Twitch AI deepfakes, and I was being critical of this. Well, the only problem is that they didn't consent, and saying, well, what do you think is happening in the rest of the porn industry? Like, you're giving regular porn a pass, but not this. Right. And people will say, like, well, sex isn't special. Sex isn't special. And trying to explain why sex is special is a strange thing, because you would sort of think, or I feel like it's obvious, like, as humans, we know sex is special. Partly because I think, we obviously consider, as a society, we know that rape is wrong and a horrific crime. And that's not true of, someone stealing a cup of coffee or even stealing your purse from you. We know that sex is an incredibly intimate and vulnerable experience, particularly for women. First of all, I mean, women are having sex with somebody who could kill them, who could really hurt them. They're in a vulnerable position. Their bodies are literally being penetrated. But also, sex is like this incredible bonding experience. Like, it's like, sex is supposed to be for fun. It's supposed to be for pleasure. It's also supposed to be for procreation. But, humans have this incredible gift of being able to have orgasms, and that sex is this thing that it causes your brain to release dopamine and oxytocin, like the love hormone, the bonding hormone that's also released when women breastfeed. This is how
Well,
you
it's
form
interesting.
bonds with humans. Like it is a very
Yeah.
special thing, and it is a big deal. Like, are you first? I mean, these women are obviously not having orgasms in
Well,
pornography,
neither are
but
the
wouldn't
men.
that be weird to be having like all
Of
of these
course.
bonding experiences
Yeah.
with all the 10 men in a gangbang? Like,
Well, yeah, it's also, yeah, of course. It's also the same with when you watch the second part of good grief, what's that movie that uh Rashida made? What's that movie called again?
oh, that's right. The first one that she did was really quite good.
Well, the first one was excellent, and then there was a series made after that, which
Yeah,
was like porn when the lights go dark or something. And one
I'll
segment
just
was
Google
actually
it.
on male performers and how they find it so difficult to have an orgasm because they have to, because that is the like the money shot, and how difficult they Hot Girls Wanted, right?
Yeah,
That's it, right? So Hot Girls Wanted Part 2 explored the men in the industry and kind of like how they're really not particularly able to finish the the scene because it's so weird. You have a lighting guy, you have a boom guy, you have this, you have that, you have this woman who's with you who's pretending to scream in pleasure, who's having a an awful time, and the men kind of the men sort of talk about the experience of not being able to, because that's what they say if you can't finish then nobody gets paid. I mean,
yeah.
imagine that type of pressure that's being put on male performers.
Yeah, which is the same pressure that's put on women in pornography, which is that, so they sign a contract, they think they're signing up for one thing, and then the scene gets worse and worse, more and more extreme. They're getting hurt, they're getting tired, they're feeling upset or emotional or disturbed. They feel like they can't take it anymore. And the director is saying, like, if you leave, no one gets paid. Like, not only do you not get
Right.
paid or you end up owing money because you pre-spent this money that you're going to be making, um, but like these other guys on set, like nobody's going to get paid. So you have to continue with this scene that is like you're getting choked, you're getting slapped, you're getting hurt, you're getting degraded that you didn't sign up for. And, the pressure that happens on set is incredible, and I don't think can be said to constitute genuine consent. Um, but then, of course, we know, and I think that Rashida covers this in that documentary Hot Girls Wanted a bit, which is that when you get in and you're kind of fresh meat, then everybody wants you and you're in high demand, and then you
Yeah.
sort of get used up. And then in order to keep your career and to keep making money, you do have to do more and more and more
More
extreme
and more
things. And
extreme
all of a
acts. Yeah.
sudden, you're doing all of these things that early on you said you never do. But nobody wants you to
Yeah.
just be having, vanilla sex anymore. Now you have to be doing the fetish stuff, the kink stuff, the violent stuff, the facial abuse stuff, the gangbanging, and
Mm.
so on and so forth.
Well, it's so interesting because you had that student who went to, I think it was Duke University, and she also had a stint in porn. And in that movie, Hot Girls Wanted, one of the girls said, well, she did facial abuse. And then they watched her facial abuse, right? Where she is just being, slapped and I mean, pissed on, like all, I mean, like stuff that like is just literally from like your nightmare, right? And then one of the girls said, listen to how she talks about porn. She doesn't talk about it. She talks about the kind of the concept, the ephemeral thing of I got into porn and I made money and now I'm a student at Duke University. But she doesn't actually talk about what she did. The because how on earth can you go on Piers Morgan, what she did, and say, yeah, I had to drink piss from a dog bowl, and I had to have, had to be choked and slapped, and that's how I made, $3,000, right, in porn. You can't really talk about that and defend. What's Piers Morgan going to say? You drank piss out of a dog bowl? Like, really? Because that's really, really, that is what facial abuse is about, is that you take a dildo, choke, shove it down the woman's throat until she vomits, and then she eats the vomit. I mean, that is the standard of that website and what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And that's what she had to do. And It is such a, by the way, when you see that for the first time, it is a traumatizing experience. It really is, to see that. You have a woman who's literally being gagged, choked, and then just eating vomit. I mean, what the hell? Like, I'd actually like if people talked more about that. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts of actually what you're fucking doing.
Yeah, like, is it really fun and sexy and cool? Yeah, porn's
Yeah,
great.
it's so
Porn's
cool.
great.
It's so cool. Yeah. No, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the gagging and eating from the dog bowl. Let's talk about the anal prolapse. Let's talk about the 8 men who are, just these scenes with Lana, where she's just, 8 men being slapped and this and that, and the intimidation of that. And also, someone in the chat is also mentioning the racism in the sex and in the porn industry, which I think is very interesting. Nobody ever talks about that. Really,
it's very interesting because, the woke, the third wave feminists, the, the LGBTQ trans women or women, the most progressive, the most woke, who would like shut down anybody and anything were they to have a
for having an
10-year-old
offensive Halloween
tweet that
costume.
yeah, for dressing up as Aladdin one year, or for making some kind of joke 10 years ago that's now considered to be racist, for saying the N-word once on a podcast a million years ago. Like, those people have nothing to say about
this.
Very, very, very overt
Very
actual
racist.
racism in pornography.
Yeah.
The fact that these girls and men too are categorized by race, and then the kind of porn that they're expected to do is also connected to these racist stereotypes.
Of course. I mean, that's why you see, like, Riley Reid, for the first time, she says, oh, one of my best scenes that I got paid the most for was my first interracial. And that's a huge, huge category, interracial. And interracial is 99% of the time is a big black man being stereotyped into kind of coercing, forcing, and harming this, like, kind of, portrayed as like this innocent white woman. I'm like, what? This is like from this is like these racist stereotypes from like 100 years ago, but it's being promoted and created day after day after day, and nobody's actually saying, like, let's say we want to be BLM, we want to talk about, like, eradicating racism, right? Well, how are you going to do that when you have people watching this content, and
when you have men masturbating to this content, coming to this content day after day after day, all around the world? These same men who will post a black square on their Instagram the next day.
Yeah. During the day they're posting the black square, and then at night they're watching ghetto gaggers. Like the absolute disconnect of that. And then Gail Dines also says, like, these men are then going out into the wider culture, and you have to say, like, what kind of men are they going to be? What kind of fathers? What kind of policemen? What kind of teachers are these men actually going to be? And we actually don't particularly know the outcome of this. This is a huge social experiment that we're doing here. And I think that that really OnlyFans and has skewed and changed men's opinion of women, because they get disappointed because they get to the bedroom and the woman doesn't want to do this stuff. And then women have been skewed because they have these expectations of men that they're just going to give them money for for nudes and this kind of transactional relationship. So who wins out of this scenario? Absolutely nobody. In kind of like the long run. Why is it that you don't see female porn stars that have been in the industry for 25 years talking about their long career and then their retirement? I mean, Lana Rhodes retired from pornography at 24.
After 8 months.
After 8 months. Mia Khalifa, who I'm disappointed because she opened up an OnlyFans, but she's another one who quit the porn industry, and after 3 months. I mean, she was actually going to be killed for the porn that she created, because she's Arab, and they made her wear a hijab and then have racist abuse kind of like shouted at her, and she was depicted then in these very obviously like this porn, and they issued a fatwa against her.
Wow.
for this stuff, you know. And she, and then the berating again, like I go back to the berating now that she gets from the porn industry and the YouTubers because she's speaking out. She's like almost a disappointment. It's like, well, Mia, you enjoyed it when I was giving you, when I was, you know, doing anal sex and slapping you. You never said no. How dare you speak out and say that you didn't like it? There's also another big case, everybody. Girls do porn is a case of a whole bunch of
Yeah, a
women
couple of
who are
people mentioned that
drugged.
in the chat, so I'm glad you
Yeah,
brought that up.
yeah. Was and they've won their case, by the way. And
Can you talk a little bit more about what happened there,
yeah,
just in case anybody
so
doesn't know?
Girls Do Porn is a co is a porn company, a porn group that got girls together, you know, got them drunk and high, and then they signed these, like, you know, porn agreements, and then kind of filmed porn. They signed the release and all the rest of it, and they ended up taking this, you know, they ended up taking Girls Do Porn to court, and now you're no longer allowed to, you know, promote it, but it you cannot remove that from the internet. You can't strip it from the internet. Well, maybe you can, because you know, you should be able to, right? But it's out there, and it's never. And these girls, they talk about, you know, their lives and how it's just kind of been totally and utterly, you know, destroyed. They can't come back from this, and it's and I feel that that is the picture that Lex Friedman doesn't want to see. He wants to have the fantasy in his head, because probably he's a porn consumer. He wants to have the fantasy in his head that these women are having a great time. Okay, they're enjoying it. They're getting paid the big bucks. And
They're just really open-minded women. They're
open-minded,
open to
you
new
know.
experiences. They like meeting new people. They
And I
like
had such
trying
a
new
wonderful
things.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so someone was saying, was that story about Mia Khalifa, or however you spell it, true? Yeah, Mia Khalifa's story. I mean, if you take a look at, I don't think she can go back to her. She is Lebanese. Yeah, I don't think she can actually physically go back there. Her, she she had. I mean, if you Google Mia Khalifa fatwa, you'll see, you know, what happened to her after she kind of created this porn. Um, you know, again, another girl who had fantasies of the rich life and the Playboy mansion and everything's going to be wonderful and blah 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 blah. But you get, you know, the porn industry is not making money off of, you know, kind of like loose erotica. You know, that's not what the hype is. You can go right now and watch the 10 most rented movies on Pornhub, and you see nobody's looking at kind of like the soft erotica that that people think they're going to be creating.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know when people say regular porn, it's like, yeah, again, I mean, regular porn is so intense and extreme and graphic. I don't know why people pretend that it's just, you know, a couple of people having romantic sex. They're just a couple who just really enjoys filming themselves have sex. That's not what's going on. I again, if people in the live chat are wanting to ask questions or leave comments, please use the super chat so that I notice them. And also don't forget to like and subscribe. I want to talk a bit about the men with you, a bit more about how porn impacts men. You sent me a video that I thought was really good, that Carl Benjamin did with Chris Williamson. Was that his name? Talking about the women, but also the men, and the impact of all of this, you know, and I was quite impressed with their commentary, actually. But it's surprising that more men, especially, again, men in this sort of, in their efforts to empower men, to, you know, encourage men to improve their own lives and to stop the kind of trashing of men that a lot of the liberal feminists did with all this like white male tears and shut up and we don't want to hear a word out of your mouth because you're a white man thing, which I think is not a good thing. But, you know, we hear about men falling behind in society and struggling with depression, struggling with social anxiety. And then at the same time, we know that a lot of these guys are spending a lot of time online looking at porn or, sending their money to these OnlyFans girls.
Right, and I think it's interesting to take a look at Andrew Tate as a kind of a character, because he is a guy who has immense amount of pull for some reason, with young guys, but at the same time, he's mocking them. He is saying, if you want to be, he's kind of saying, if you want to be a great independent guy, you got to take your life together, and you got to be strong, and you got to be a good man and be a good this, but come and talk to the women that I'm managing on webcam. And he talks, quite in detail about how he managed to he would be talking to men, and this is a guy who's a supposed men's rights activist. I don't really see him as a men's rights activist, but he's in that space, and he's talking in detail about how he would go on to the cam websites and talk to the men and coerce them into giving more tips, more money, and paying upwards of $30, $40, $50, $60,000, through camming. So he's actually a scam artist, who is, kind of operating in plain sight. But it's a lot of people are coming and saying now, kind of what has happened to them, and these guys who have spent all of their money, to cam girls, and it's I think that your average woman has kind of come to terms with the fact in many ways that she may be, going on a Tinder date with a guy who's addicted to porn. I mean, I think that that's sort of like a reality, and a lot of women have just kind of said, well, it's normal, everybody does it, whatever, it's not a big deal, right? But then I think that having a complicated online pseudo girlfriend experience with someone online is almost like another kind of step in like another direction. And a lot of OnlyFans girls have been involved in, violent crime. And one of them actually was in Florida, where a girl had a man follow her, stalk her to Florida, and then kill her, and then write on the wall something like I loved you, why did you make me do this, right? And I think that a lot of the people who are addicted to OnlyFans kind of have a love-hate relationship, because they love the person that's creating the content, they love that they're doing this, but they hate what is going on, because that she's not yours, that it's not that Joaquin Phoenix movie Her, it's not Lars and the blow up doll girl, right? It's even more twisted. And someone says, come on, these stories are all made up. You can go on to DuckDuckGo, don't go on to Google, and take a look at OnlyFans murders, and you'll see in 1 week in particular, I think it was around a year ago, there was 3 murders in 1 week of OnlyFans models throughout the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that interestingly isn't talked about much, like all of the stalking.
And in the porn industry, and the suicides in the porn industry of people who come out of it, and the drug overdoses, and the average life expectancy of women in the sex industry is 37 years old. No, and Ayala did not talk about all of the suicides, all of the drug overdoses that have happened from women that have left the porn industry, because they're traumatized. It doesn't. It's you don't need to put on your monocle and kind of ponder.
It's like, well, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? Where's the proof?
evidence?
Just listen to what they're saying. Just like observe. Just know anything about human beings. Also, like have any understanding of psychology and trauma and what happens when people have trauma. I mean, that's where addiction comes from. Most often it comes from people who have childhood trauma. Gabor Mate, in his book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, I think it's called, about addiction, talks about, he worked for many, many years on the downtown east side with people struggling with really intense addictions, living on the streets.
Yeah.
And he said essentially all of the women that he dealt with had past, childhood experiences with rape and sexual assault and molestation. All of
It's
them.
not,
And that's
it's so true.
they end up addicted and in prostitution, and it's all interconnected.
Have a look at Soft White Underbelly, that a channel, and the number of girls that are interviewed there, that have been on OnlyFans, that are currently cam models, that are currently engaged in prostitution, even prostitution at the high level, right? And they talk about their lives, and I don't think that any of them have come from a stable home environment and just woken up one day and just decided to, kind of engage in the sex industry. I mean, it's almost unheard of.
I mean, maybe
Every
Lex
time he's
Friedman will talk to one of these women, what
yeah,
I
well,
mean?
Soft White Underbelly, I think is great because he just kind of interviews them. He's very non-judgmental. He's very just like, he'll have like a pregnant 13-year-old prostitute, and he's not judging her. He's not, of course you can't judge her, God. But he's not shaming her. He's just asking questions. And it's all the same with all of these kind of cam models, with all of these. And I'm not saying that there's not the one. I'm going to get a message now from the one woman who's like, I'm not a victim. I'm really, really happy making $100,000. I'm happy for that. I don't want to hear these stories about people who were deeply traumatized and getting involved in the sex industry. For me, I'd much rather imagine a world where the sex industry is completely filled with very, very together, well-managed people who are just having a bloody great time. I'd much rather imagine that world than actually know the truth, that it's made up of incredibly broken, damaged people with a hell of a lot of trauma, and that of course, everybody knows the sex industry does not attract people who are, I don't want to say normal people, but it doesn't.
Well, I think like mentally, like emotionally,
course.
psychologically healthy people, women who have high levels of self-esteem, women who, genuinely really like themselves and have purpose in life. I mean, it's just it, and again, I think people are like, well, Ayla and her fans like to be like, where's the data? Where's the data? Where's the proof of correlation? Or they'll challenge me and say like, oh, you're dismissing her as like traumatized and disconnected. You're a psychologist now. And I'm like, just listen to her talk. Listen to what she says about herself and how she describes her life. She talks about this. But and listen to and observe what any of these women have to say. And it all becomes very obvious, and you would have to be very intentionally trying to keep yourself ignorant in order to ignore that reality. And that ignorance has a purpose because you don't want to stop using porn, or you don't want to be put in a position where your ethics force you to need to challenge this stuff for whatever reason.
I mean, if I was a porn consumer, I know, and I'm not speculating about Lex Friedman, but I reckon he's probably a porn consumer, right? But if I was, I would much rather imagine that everything I was consuming was made totally ethically from girls who were just having a wonderful time, really enjoying themselves. It's much easier for me to imagine that world than to, imagine that I'm getting off to some. That's why Lana's content has been affected by her coming out against the industry, because now it's tainted with the truth. So now you're watching Lana, and in the back of your mind, she hated every single second of this. And
and she's not just this like hypersexual chick.
Right.
Like,
yeah. I mean, obviously she's now damaged her. She's, in their opinion, she has now damaged her digital reputation by becoming a human, by having a baby, by saying she actually didn't enjoy this,
and that she was incredibly sexually naive. She'd only had sex with one guy before that.
Right, and she came from a house,
and then that Mike and Logan Paul and these guys are presenting her as this super sexually experienced woman when the very opposite is the case. And they know better. This is a man who is in a relationship with this young woman who knows everything about her past, and I'm sure knew how she felt about the porn industry and completely ignored that and, in fact, promoted it. Like, what
Right.
a
Yeah.
gross thing to do to your partner. Like,
Well,
I just,
you know what I said? I saw Tana Mojo opened up an OnlyFans, and Mike commented on the Instagram and said, "Well done. Let me know when you want to work with the Queen." I'm like, is that your girlfriend you're talking about? Are you trying to are you actually doing that? You want to pimp her out? You imagine that someone posts a nude picture, let's say on Instagram, and your boyfriend comes and comments, "Let me know when you want to, you know, finger my girl on camera." I mean, like, come on. That is some putrid stuff we're talking about here.
it's
It's
really
you
strange.
know, that is pimping, really, low key pimping.
Yeah.
Let
Yeah.
me know when you want to work with the Queen. What?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. And no one's like saying him, no one's calling him out, calling him a simp or a cuck or whatever. They're just like, oh, this is like so cool because the fans are 12 years old, right?
Yeah.
It's a 12-year-old mindset. It really is. It's a 12-year-old mindset to be dreaming, oh my gosh, I'm like, married to a porn star, or I'm dating a porn star. And then in reality, you're like, no, I'm dating this woman who's been fucked on camera. And this is awful. This is terrible.
Yeah. I think we should probably sign off pretty soon. It's been almost 2 hours, and I know it's very, very late for you over there. But I mean, I suppose I wanted to address the how to get men off of porn thing, partly because Paul, who I think has left the chat now, but he said porn has become too normalized. We need to make fun of men who use porn. It will put a big dent in viewership. And I've heard that, like, let's shame men who watch porn. But I mean, maybe that would work for some men. I'm not necessarily opposed to shaming people who do bad things. I'm definitely not opposed to shaming people who do bad things. But I have sympathy for a lot of these guys too. And, like, you can't, it's, I've said openly, like, I don't think that the tactic used by a lot of radical feminists, which is to like scream at dudes who use porn and to call them all sorts of names. I mean, that's just not going to be effective. It's just not. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, some woman on the internet is like screaming at me and calling me a rapist. Like, I guess I'm going to think more deeply about my habits, or am I going to be like, fuck this girl? Like, like, I'm
Well, it's
totally shutting
interesting.
off and blocking you. But I know men in my life who have stopped using porn of their own volitions for a variety of reasons, um, including younger men, partly just because they sort of realized what it was doing to their brains, what it
Mhm,
was doing to their dicks, what it was doing to their relationships, or
mhm.
even because they realized how unethical the porn industry really was.
Yeah, and it's Waleed Hassan makes an interesting comment. He's saying Adam 22 and his porn star wife interview wannabe porn stars and then have a threesome with them. It's some predatory stuff. That's great. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that that's actually what's going on. On that YouTube channel. It's very, very popular. It is incredibly predatory. I also agree with you. I don't think the right approach is to scream at people that watch porn and men that watch porn and call them all kinds of names. I don't think it works. I think that deep down, most men want to get off porn. They don't like being addicted to this stuff. And just, even like that shocking statistic that 30% of men are not having sex, 30% of men 18 to 30 are not having sex, that must suck.
It's so
Like,
depressing, and I mean, you hear from men all the time. So many men have said this, that they watch porn and then feel gross after. They watch porn and they feel
of
shame
course,
after, or
yeah.
like it's this high-low thing. The same experience that you
Right.
have with addiction or with, like gambling, for example.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. A lot of people describe that. that they have this experience watching it, and then the kind of like the shame afterwards. And it's the same if you speak to someone who's addicted to Percocet. Like it feels great when you pop the pill, but then when you're coming down, you kind of realize like this is a scumbag thing to be involved in. And I think I don't know if we've reached the apex of porn, like if now we've reached the stage where, I mean, I've spoken a year ago to a guy that sold sex robots, not sex robots, like sex dolls, right? And I was just like, does nobody have any kind of shame like in buying this? He's like, no, I sell 30,000 units a year. It's like of these kind of sex dolls. So maybe we've reached the apex and we're going to come down now, and people are going to say like, no, actually, like I want to fall in love and have a relationship with someone, or even just have a one night stand. I think a lot of people are going to have to come to that realization themselves. And I don't know what's going to cause the cultural shift. Maybe it will be from more men coming out and speaking out and allowing other men giving them the making it okay, to talk about how empty and sad it is. And if ever anybody goes over to the Lotus Eaters channel, they focus a lot on this. So I've a lot of my insights have come from them, who, their demographic is like 80%, 90%, men in the millennial and Gen Z category. And this is a really, really big issue for them. Speaking about it.
People were talking about the Lotus Eaters channel in the chat, and I had not heard of that before.
Yeah. And Waleed is also saying we will see a full consciousness of porn in the next 20 years. I think it's going to get way worse before it gets better. I don't know if I can really speculate on that. I think it might, but at the same time, I don't know how it's going to get that. I don't know how it's going to get worse. I really don't. With the AI and the deep fake and all the rest of it.
Yeah,
like
with the porn industry reality.
And with the porn industry being so violent to a degree, I don't know where we're going to go. But if anybody, I always say, if anybody has been a victim of OnlyFans, please get in touch with me on my Twitter. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to tell your story. If you're interested, also, I know some, lawyers that are looking to take on cases. So, please come to me. And if anybody wants to read more on the gender mapping project, it's gendermapper.org. And I really want to thank you, Megan, for giving me the opportunity to speak. I've really, really enjoyed it. And I hope that this gives more people the feeling and the drive to speak more about porn and OnlyFans.
Yeah, I so appreciate connecting with you. I got so much great feedback on the podcast interview that I did with you for Feminist Current, and I'm so grateful that you're so knowledgeable about all of this stuff. And I think it's so important that we speak really openly and honestly about all this stuff, because there's such a huge cultural denial, and I think it's so damaging in such a wide variety of ways, to women, to girls, to boys, to men, to relationships, to society. It's this giant, massive lie, and then there's all the abuse that happens within all that. It's just,
and then all the poor girls that are 18 years old and their boyfriends are whacking them around the face and choking them during sex, and they don't actually know that this is not normal. They are the ones I think about maybe the most, to be honest, are the young girls that kind of say to me, like, my boyfriend wants me to do these things and I don't understand why. I understand why.
And the girls and the women too, there's women my age who are still going along with this stuff too, who are just accepting that their partners are gonna watch porn forever, and it's making them feel bad about themselves, and it's having this horrible impact on their relationships. It's making them feel insecure. It's making them feel angry. It's making them feel hurt, and they can't say anything, or they think they can't say anything. Like, so many women and girls think that they just have to expect and accept that their partners use porn, and they don't.
when you speak up about it, like if you say like, oh, I don't want my, I don't, if you speak up in a group with your, male and female friends, I don't like it that my boyfriend watches porn. They're going to say, oh, don't be silly, like whatever. Just you come on, everyone does it. It's
It's
normal. It's
just a
like,
fantasy. People have
yeah,
fantasies.
it's just fantasizing, whatever. And it's almost like it's normal. Everyone's doing it. It's like when people say like, oh, even the queen farts, it's like, yeah, maybe okay, maybe the queen farts. Yeah, come on, even the queen watches porn. Like it's just not a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm grateful for your work, and I'm so glad that we did this stream together. I hope that we'll do more in the future. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
I enjoyed this conversation, as dark as it can be. And again, yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you all next time. Goodbye. Have a good night. Adios.